My name is Donna Spencer. I'm 28 living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, a city with just enough buzz to keep you awake but quiet enough to think. That's what I thought anyway until last Christmas Eve shattered everything. I was at my parents' house, the air thick with pine and roasted turkey. The dining table was set for a holiday feast, me, my parents, my older sister all together. I expected warmth, maybe a toast to family. Instead, my parents stood glasses raised and delivered a shock. "We've decided," my father said, voice steady, "the bookstore chain. The house, our entire estate. It all goes to your sister." My sister, who's never worked a serious day, smirked, her eyes gleaming with triumph. I froze my fork halfway to my mouth, the words slicing through me. I'd spent years building that bookstore chain, turning a single shop into a local legend. Every late night, every tough deal, I poured my soul into it. And now they'd cast me aside like I was nothing. I stumbled out into the Michigan cold, my chest-tight betrayal burning in my veins. A week later, under a snowy streetlight, a stranger approached. He pressed an envelope into my hands, his gaze sharp. "You deserve to know the truth," he said, then vanished. My hands trembled. The weight of that envelope felt like it could change everything. If you've ever been blindsided by family drama, hit subscribe and join me to uncover what was inside that envelope. It's a story you won't believe. Growing up in Ann Arbor, I was shaped by the hum of our family's bookstore chain, Green Harvest. It wasn't just a business. It was my grandmother's dream built from a single shop on Liberty Street. Nellie Spencer. My grandmother was a force of nature. Tall with silver hair always tied back, she had a laugh that filled rooms and a mind sharper than anyone I knew. She'd sit me on the counter as a kid, reading me stories from dusty hardcovers, teaching me how books could change lives. Donna. She'd say, her voice warm but firm. "This place isn't about money, it's about ideas, trust, and leaving something good behind." Those words stuck with me, a guidepost through the chaos of our family. Green Harvest wasn't huge, but it was respected. From that one shop, Nellie grew it into 5 across Michigan, each one a haven for book lovers. She believed in doing things right, fair prices, local authors, community events. I loved that about her, and I wanted to carry it forward. When I was old enough, I dove into the business. After college at 22, I started managing the flagship store. I worked late nights balancing accounts, curated author readings, even saved a deal with a major publisher when they tried to undercut us. I'd fly to Chicago, meet suppliers face to face, and fight for every contract with plans I'd spent days perfecting. My grandmother would visit, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You're the soul of Green Harvest," my dear Nellie told me, her hand squeezing mine. But my family wasn't as simple as those moments. My father, Thomas Spencer, and my mother, Linda Spencer, were different. They took over Green Harvest after Nellie retired, but they didn't share her vision. To them, the bookstores were a status symbol, a way to mingle with Ann Arbor's elite. My father loved the spotlight, fancy dinners, tailored suits, and connections he bragged about at every chance. My mother was quieter, but just as calculating, always pushing for bigger profits, flashier events. They didn't care about the late-night book clubs or the local writers I championed. They wanted glitz, not substance. Then there was my sister Riley Spencer, 3 years older than me. Riley was a mirror of our parents, charmed by attention, allergic to hard work. She had a title at Green Harvest, something vague like brand ambassador, but everyone knew it was a sham. She'd show up for photo ops, post on social media, and leave the real work to me. Once she botched a marketing campaign so badly, I had to spend weeks fixing it. Yet my parents fawned over her, praising her vision while I scrubbed the floors after hours. I didn't mind the work I loved. Green Harvest loved what Nellie built, but their favoritism stung a quiet wound I buried deep. Nellie, my grandmother, was my anchor. My grandmother invited me to her small house on the edge of town, where we'd sip tea slowly and talk about the bookstore's future. One evening, Nellie's voice softer than usual, my grandmother said, "Donna, my dear, I trust you to keep Green Harvest true to its roots, not for profit, but for what it represents." I nodded, promising my grandmother I'd protect her legacy with all my heart. My grandmother smiled, but a darkness lingered in her eyes, as if Nellie knew something I didn't. That darkness became real one cold March morning. I was restocking shelves when my phone buzzed Nellie's neighbor, her voice trembling. "Donna, get to the hospital now. Your grandmother's not well." My heart sank. I dropped everything, books, half-shelved coffee spilling across the counter, and raced through Ann Arbor's rain-soaked streets. At the hospital, my grandmother lay pale, yet calm, her frail hand in mine. The doctor said she'd had a heart attack. Time was running out. "Donna, my dear," my grandmother whispered, her grip tightening, "don't let them destroy what we built. Hold fast to the truth." I didn't understand then, but I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. My grandmother passed that night at 80, and I felt the world collapse beneath me. Her funeral was a spectacle just as my parents wanted. Green Harvest was a big name in Ann Arbor, and the room overflowed with Flowers' local authors and store regulars paying respects. I stood in a black dress trying to hold it together, but every condolence felt like a needle. My father was all charm, shaking hands in a crisp suit, his smile polished but cold. My mother played the grieving daughter, perfectly dabbing her eyes for the crowd. Riley arrived late, her designer coat creased, scrolling her phone in the corner. I watched them, feeling a chasm grow. They didn't grieve Nellie, they grieved the image they could milk. The weeks after were a blur. I threw myself back into work, but Green Harvest felt hollow without my grandmother. I'd walk past her old office expecting to hear her laugh, but it was just silence. Then came the inheritance meeting set for a week after Christmas. I didn't expect much. Nellie had always said I'd carry on her work not just for money, but for her values. I trusted her. We met at my parents' sleek office downtown, a sterile room with glass walls and leather chairs. My father sat at the head, exuding control. My mother stood beside him, her face unreadable. Riley lounged in a chair, picking at her nails, already acting like she owned the place. The lawyer, a man with a slick suit and nervous eyes, walked in with a thin folder. He cleared his throat. "I'm afraid Nellie Spencer left no will," he said, his voice flat. My stomach twisted. No will. My grandmother was meticulous, always planning every detail. Without a will, he continued the estate. Green Harvest, the properties, all assets goes to Thomas and Linda Spencer as her children. My father nodded, a faint smirk on his lips. My mother's eyes flicked to me, cold and final. Riley looked up, her smile sharp. I sat there, my heart pounding, realizing what was coming. They weren't just taking Nellie's legacy, they were rewriting it. The inheritance meeting left me reeling, but the real blow came a week later. I was in the flagship Green Harvest store arranging a display of local poetry when my father called me into his office. The room was cold, all glass and steel, a far cry from my grandmother's cozy shop. My mother stood beside him, arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. Riley, my sister, sat in a corner scrolling her phone, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Donna," my father said, his voice sharp. "We're making changes. Riley's taking over Green Harvest, full control. Your services are no longer needed." I stared, my pulse hammering. Fired after years of sweat and sleepless nights building this place, I wanted to scream, to remind them of every contract I'd won, every event I'd pulled off. But their eyes, Thomas's cold, Linda's distant, told me it was pointless. I walked out, my hands shaking, the jingle of the shop's bell mocking me as I left. Ann Arbor's winter bit harder after that. My savings dwindled fast, rent bills, no income. I took odd jobs shelving books at a rival store, serving coffee at a diner, even cleaning offices after hours. Each shift chipped away at my pride, but I kept going, telling myself it was temporary. My apartment became a cage, its walls closing in as I lay awake replaying my parents' betrayal. Green Harvest wasn't just a job, it was Nellie's legacy, my purpose. Now it was gone, handed to Riley, who'd turn it into a soulless chain. I felt hollow, like I'd lost my grandmother all over again. One snowy evening after a grueling shift at the diner, I stopped at a quiet cafe on Main Street to warm up. The place was dim, nearly empty, the smell of burnt coffee lingering. I sat in a corner nursing a cheap latte when the door creaked open. A man walked in, tall, maybe 60, with gray hair peeking from a worn cap and eyes that carried too many secrets. He moved straight to my table, no hesitation, and my stomach tightened. "Donna Spencer?" he asked, his voice low, gravelly. I nodded, gripping my cup. "I'm Ralph Ramsey," he said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. "Your grandmother, Nellie Spencer, was my colleague years ago. She wanted you to have this." His gaze held mine, sharp and urgent. "Open it alone and be careful. Some people don't want this seen." Before I could ask more, he stood and left, vanishing into the snow. My heart pounded as I clutched the envelope. It was thin but heavy, sealed with red wax, like it held a secret too big for its size. I didn't open it there, Ralph's warning echoed in my head. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat at my kitchen table, the snow outside muffling the world. With trembling hands, I broke the seal. Inside were 3 things: a typed document, a handwritten letter, and a USB drive. The document was a will signed by my grandmother, Nellie Spencer, with a notary's seal. It stated clearly, Green Harvest, her house, her savings valued at over $10 million, were to go to me, Donna Spencer, to preserve her vision. My throat tightened as I read it again, tears blurring the words. Nellie had kept her promise. The letter was in my grandmother's handwriting, steady but faint, as if Nellie wrote it in her final days. "Donna, my dear." My grandmother's letter began, "If you're reading this, things have gone wrong. I trusted you, my grandchild, to carry Green Harvest forward, but I didn't trust those around you. Protect what we built and don't let them win." I pressed the letter to my chest, Nellie's voice ringing in my mind, warm but fierce. The USB held an audio file. I plugged it into my laptop, hands shaking, and hit play. My grandmother's voice filled the room, frail but resolute. "Donna, my dear grandchild, if you hear this, I'm gone. I wrote a will, but I feared it wouldn't reach you. The lawyer isn't trustworthy, and I suspect your parents will do anything to control Green Harvest. I gave a copy to Ralph Ramsey, my old friend. Find him if you need help." I sat there frozen, the weight of my grandmother's words sinking in. No will, that lawyer's claim was a lie. My parents hadn't just betrayed me, they'd betrayed Nellie, twisting her legacy for their gain. I thought of my father's smirk, my mother's cold stare, Riley's smug grin. It all made sense now. But why hide the will? What were they afraid of? I replayed Nellie's recording, her voice steady, despite her frailty. "They want the money, Donna, not the values. Don't let them take it." Anger surged through me, mixed with a spark of hope. This envelope wasn't just paper, it was proof, a chance to fight back. But doubt crept in. Ralph's warning, "Be careful," rang in my ears. If my parents were behind this, what else were they capable of? The will letter and recording were powerful, but they weren't enough. I needed proof, something to tie them to the lie. I thought of my grandmother, her eyes full of trust, and my resolve hardened. I couldn't let Nellie down. But I also knew I was stepping into something dangerous. My parents weren't just greedy, they were ruthless. I tucked the envelope under my mattress, checked the locks again, and stared out at the snowy night. The truth was in my hands, but the fight was just beginning. The envelope from Ralph Ramsey burned in my hands, but I knew I couldn't fight alone. My grandmother's will, her letter, her voice, they were proof, but not enough to take on my parents. I needed someone who could turn clues into a weapon. So I sought out Stephen Grant, a lawyer known in Ann Arbor for tackling messy estate battles. His office was a small cluttered space, downtown, books, stacked high papers spilling over his desk. Stephen, about 50, with salt and pepper hair and a steady gaze, shook my hand firmly. "Donna," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "Tell me everything." I laid out the envelope's contents, the will, Nellie's letter, the USB recording, along with the story of my parents' betrayal and Riley's takeover. Stephen listened, jotting notes, his eyes narrowing as he played my grandmother's recording. "This is serious," he said, leaning back. "The will's a start, but we need proof the original was hidden, financial records, witnesses, something concrete. And Donna, if your parents did this, they won't let you dig easily. Be careful." I left his office with a flicker of hope, but also dread. My parents, Thomas and Linda Spencer, weren't just greedy, they had connections, influence. I needed more than Stephen's legal savvy. Through a contact, I found Linda Blake, a private investigator with a reputation for uncovering secrets others buried. We met at a quiet diner off Washtenaw Avenue, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she sipped black coffee. Linda, in her late 40s with short brown hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, got straight to the point. "What do you need, Donna?" I explained everything: Nellie's will, my parents' lies, Ralph's warning. "Find me proof," I said. "Bank records, payments, anything tying my parents to that lawyer." Linda nodded. "I'll dig, but if they're hiding something this big, they'll cover their tracks. Watch your back." Days later, Linda called with a lead. "Your father withdrew $60,000 in cash last spring, right after your grandmother's death. No clear recipient, but the timing's suspicious." My heart raced. $60,000, enough to bribe a lawyer to lose a will. I passed the info to Stephen, who started drafting a petition to reopen the inheritance case. But as I dug deeper, the air around me grew heavier. One night after a late shift at the diner, I found my car's tires slashed in an empty lot. Scratched into the hood was a single word: stop. My blood ran cold. This wasn't random, it was a warning. I called Linda, my voice shaking. "They know I'm looking," I said. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Donna, you're rattling cages. Change your routines, lock your doors, and don't go out alone at night." The threats didn't stop there. A few days later, an unmarked envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside, a typed note: "Leave town or you'll regret it." No signature, but I knew who sent it. My parents weren't just fighting for Green Harvest, they wanted me gone. I started checking my windows obsessively, avoiding my usual routes, always glancing over my shoulder. Fear crept in, but so did anger. Nellie trusted me to protect her legacy, and I wouldn't back down. I reached out to Ralph Ramsey, the man who'd given me the envelope. We met at a foggy park near the Huron River early morning when no one else was around. Ralph looked worn, his eyes darting like he expected trouble. "Donna," he said, his voice low, "I warned you. Your parents have eyes everywhere. I've been followed since I gave you that envelope." My stomach twisted. "Followed?" I asked. He nodded. "After Nellie died, I got threats, strangers telling me to destroy her will. I kept it safe for you, but they're not playing games." I gripped the bench, Ralph's words echoing my grandmother's recording. "I need proof," I said. "Stephen says we need financial records to nail them." Ralph sighed. Your parents are careful, but nobody's perfect. Keep digging, but don't trust anyone, not even family. His words hit hard. Family. I thought of Riley, my sister, basking in her new role at Green Harvest, oblivious to the cost. I hadn't spoken to her since I was fired, but I couldn't shake the image of her smug smile. Could she know about the will? Was she part of this? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the next step. Linda Blake kept digging tracking bank records and old contacts from the lawyer's office. One evening, she texted me to meet at a dive bar on the edge of town. Found something her message read. I arrived heart-pounding and found her in a corner booth, a folder in front of her. Your mother made a transfer $30,000 2 months after the first withdrawal, Linda said, sliding the folder to me. It went to an account linked to the lawyer's firm. Not direct proof, but it's a thread. Pull it and their story unravels. I was studying the documents when my phone buzzed an unknown number. Meet me at the old bookstore midnight, the text read. It's about your parents. My gut screamed trap, but the location, the original Green Harvest shop, felt too specific. Against my better judgment, I went slipping through Ann Arbor's quiet streets, the old shop's faded sign looming in the dark. I stepped inside, the familiar smell of books hitting me like a memory of Nellie. A figure stood in the shadows and my heart stopped. Then they stepped into the light, Riley, my sister. Her face was pale, no trace of her usual arrogance. Donna, she said, her voice shaking, we need to talk. I froze, every instinct on edge. What is this, Riley? I snapped. Another game? She shook her head, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. I found this in Dad's office. Emails between him, Mom, and the lawyer. They planned to hide Nellie's will, Donna. They paid him to make it disappear. I stared, disbelief warring with anger. Why tell me now? I demanded. Riley's eyes glistened, her hands trembling. I thought I wanted this, the company, their approval. But they're using me too. They don't care about Green Harvest, just the money. I can't be part of this anymore. She pressed the USB into my hand. Take it. Use it. But be careful, they know you're close. I studied her, searching for a lie, but saw only fear in her eyes. Riley, who'd mocked me, who'd taken everything, was handing me a weapon. Was it guilt, jealousy? I didn't know, but I took the USB, my mind racing. If this is a trick, I said, my voice hard, I'll never forgive you. Riley nodded, her face crumpling. I know I've been awful, Donna, but I'm trying to make it right. We left separately, my heart pounding as I slipped into the night. The USB felt like a ticking bomb, but also a key. My parents' lies were unraveling, but the danger was closing in. I had to act fast, or I'd lose more than Nellie's legacy. The USB from Riley felt like a grenade in my pocket, but I wasn't ready to trust her, not yet. I took it to Stephen Grant's office the next morning, my hands still trembling from the midnight meeting. His desk was buried under legal files, but he cleared a space, his eyes sharp, as I handed over the new evidence. The emails on the USB were damning conversations between my father, Thomas Spencer, my mother, Linda Spencer, and the lawyer plotting to bury my grandmother's will. Phrases like make it disappear and pay him whatever it takes burned into my mind. Combined with Linda Blake's financial records, $60,000 withdrawn. After Nellie's death, $30,000 more. 2 months later, it was enough for Stephen to act. We're filing a petition today, he said, his voice steady. This is fraud, Donna. We'll reopen the inheritance case, but brace yourself. Your parents won't go down quietly. The news hit Ann Arbor like a storm. By afternoon, local papers ran headlines about the Green Harvest scandal, hinting at fraud without naming me. My phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, others accusing me of tearing the family apart. I ignored them, but the weight of scrutiny pressed harder. My father called that evening, his voice icy over the line. "Donna, you're making a mistake," he said, each word dripping with venom. "Drop this or you'll regret it." I hung up, my heart pounding, but his threat lingered. My mother stayed silent, but I knew she was pulling strings behind the scenes. Riley, too, went quiet. No texts, no calls. Had she betrayed me again? I couldn't tell, but I had no choice but to push forward. The court date came a month later on a gray April morning. The Ann Arbor probate courtroom was cold, its wooden walls heavy with tension. I sat beside Stephen, my hands clasped tightly, feeling like I was walking into a battlefield. My father sat across the room, his tailored suit pristine, his face a mask of calm. My mother was beside him, her eyes fixed ahead, unreadable. The lawyer, a man I now knew as Gregory Holt, sat with them, his nervous tics betraying his polished exterior. Riley wasn't there, and her absence gnawed at me. Was she back on their side? Stephen leaned over, whispering, "Stay focused, Donna. We've got this." I nodded, clutching Nellie's letter in my pocket like a talisman. The judge, a woman with a stern face and piercing eyes, called the room to order. Stephen stood, his voice clear and commanding. "Your Honor, we're here to reopen the inheritance case of Nellie Spencer. Evidence suggests her will was deliberately hidden by Thomas and Linda Spencer with assistance from their lawyer, Gregory Holt. He laid out the case methodically, my grandmother's will, her letter, the USB recording, the financial withdrawals, and Riley's emails. Each piece landed like a hammer, the courtroom silent except for the rustle of papers. I watched my father's jaw tighten, my mother's hands grip her purse, Holt's fingers twitching on the table. Gregory Holt spoke next, his voice smooth but strained. "Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. No will was ever received from Nellie Spencer. The documents presented are mere copies lacking legal weight, and this is a desperate attempt to tarnish a respected family." His words were slick, but I saw sweat bead on his forehead. I couldn't stay silent. Against Stephen's warning glance, I stood. "Your Honor," I said, my voice shaking but firm. My grandmother, Nellie Spencer, was meticulous. She wrote a will and trusted a copy to a trusted friend and warned me it might be hidden. Gregory Holt is lying, and I can prove it. The room froze, all eyes on me. My father's glare could have burned through steel, but I held my ground. Stephen seized the moment, calling our first witness, Ralph Ramsey. Ralph walked in, older and wearier than when I'd last seen him, but his eyes were steady. He took the oath, his voice low but clear. "I'm Ralph Ramsey, a former colleague of Nellie Spencer. She gave me a copy of her will before she passed, fearing it would be destroyed. She didn't trust Gregory Holt or her children, Thomas and Linda. I was followed, threatened, told to burn the will, but I kept it for Donna." His words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. My parents' faces paled. Holt's hands shook visibly. Stephen played my grandmother's recording next. Nellie's voice, frail but fierce, echoed through the room. "Donna, my dear grandchild, I wrote a will, but I feared it wouldn't reach you. The lawyer isn't trustworthy, and I suspect your parents will do anything to control Green Harvest." The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen pausing. Stephen pressed on, presenting Linda Blake's financial records, $60,000 withdrawn by my father, $30,000 by my mother, timed perfectly with the will's disappearance. These transactions, Stephen said, align with payments to Gregory Holt and attempts to silence Ralph Ramsey. Holt stammered, his composure cracking. "Those withdrawals are unrelated personal expenses," he claimed, but his voice wavered. My father tried to interrupt, his face red, but the judge silenced him with a sharp look. Stephen called a surprise witness, an employee from Holt's firm, a young woman named Karen Wells. She'd worked as Holt's assistant and seen the original will in his safe before it vanished. I asked Mr. Holt about it. Karen said, her voice trembling, but he told me to stay quiet. Said it wasn't my business. My mother's head dropped, her hands clenched. My father gripped his chair, his knuckles white. The judge's gavel struck, cutting through the tension. Based on the evidence, she said, her voice stern, this court orders a criminal investigation into Thomas Spencer, Linda, Spencer and Gregory Holt for suspected fraud and document concealment. The inheritance case will be reviewed once the investigation concludes. I exhaled, a weight lifting from my chest. Stephen squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "We did it, Donna, but it's not over." I nodded, my eyes locked on my parents. They stood, my father's face a storm of rage, my mother's eerily blank. Holt muttered to himself, gathering papers in a panic. They left without a glance at me, but I felt their defeat in the air. As we walked out, Ann Arbor's streets felt different, less suffocating, but still heavy. The lawsuit made waves, with newspapers splashing Green Harvest fraud scandal across front pages. Old friends texted, some cheering me on, others calling me a traitor. I didn't care, I'd fought for Nellie's truth. Stephen met me the next day, his face grim but determined. "The investigation's moving fast," he said. "They're pulling bank records, interviewing Holt's staff. Your parents are cornered, but they'll fight dirty. Stay sharp." I nodded, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind, "Protect what we built." I'd won this round, but the war wasn't over. The courtroom had given me back Green Harvest, but I knew my parents' next move could be worse. The courtroom victory should have felt like a triumph, but it left me hollow. Green Harvest was mine again, Nellie's legacy. The bookstores I'd poured my heart into handed back by the judge's gavel. But as I stood outside the courthouse, Ann Arbor's spring air sharp against my skin, I realized something. I didn't want it. Not anymore. The shelves of books, the cozy corners, the memories of my grandmother. They were tainted now, stained by my parents' greed and Riley's complicity. Thomas and Linda Spencer, my father and mother, were under criminal investigation, their names splashed across newspapers as fraudsters. Gregory Holt, their lawyer, faced his own probe, his career unraveling. The truth was out, but it came at a cost. My family was broken, and I couldn't unsee their betrayal. I met Stephen Grant at his office a week later, the weight of the decision pressing on me. "Donna," he said, his voice steady, "you've got Green Harvest back. What's next?" I stared at the papers on his desk, the will Nellie's letter, the financial records Linda Blake uncovered. "I'm done," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "I'm selling the bookstores. Nellie wanted me to protect her vision, but I can't do it here, not with their shadows hanging over me." Stephen nodded, his eyes kind but unsurprised. "It's your call," he said. "But whatever you do, make it for you, not them." I left his office, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Protect what we built, my dear grandchild. I'd protect it, but not the way I'd thought. Selling Green Harvest wasn't easy. I worked with a broker, met buyers, and finalized the deal in weeks. The bookstores went to a local cooperative, a group that promised to keep Nellie's values, community ideas, trust alive. The sale brought in millions, enough to secure my future, but I didn't feel joy. Each signature felt like letting go of my grandmother, like losing her all over again. Yet it also felt right. I couldn't rebuild on a foundation cracked by lies. My parents tried to reach me, letters, calls, even a message through Riley, but I ignored them. Thomas and Linda had chosen money over family, and I was done pretending we could go back. Riley was the hardest to face. After her midnight confession, she'd vanished again, dodging my calls. I heard she was running Green Harvest's social media from a distance, playing the victim as the scandal grew. One evening, I ran into her at a cafe on Liberty Street, the same street where Nellie's first shop stood. Riley looked different, thinner. Her eyes tired, no trace of her old swagger. "Donna," she said, her voice soft. Can we talk? I wanted to walk away, but something stopped me. We sat, the air heavy between us. I'm sorry, she said, her hands twisting in her lap. I didn't know how far they'd go. I just wanted their approval. I looked at her, searching for the sister I'd once known, but all I saw was regret too late. You chose them, Riley, I said, my voice steady. You stood by while they erased Nellie's wishes. I can't forgive that. She nodded, tears falling, but I stood and left. That was the last time we spoke. I moved out of my cramped apartment, leaving Ann Arbor behind. I settled in a small town nearby Ypsilanti, where the streets were quieter, the air lighter. I rented a modest house, started freelancing as a book editor, working with local authors the way Nellie taught me. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt honest. Each day I woke up without the weight of my parents' lies or Riley's betrayal. I thought of my grandmother often, her laugh, her lessons. This place is about ideas, trust, and leaving something good behind, she'd said. I was doing that now on my terms. Looking back, I learned a hard truth: family isn't always a safe haven. When greed blinds those closest to you, it can tear everything apart. My parents chose power over love, and Riley chose their approval over me. But I chose myself. I learned to protect my own worth, to stand tall, even when the people I trusted most tried to break me. Nellie's legacy wasn't just green harvest, it was the strength she gave me to walk away. To anyone listening, here's my warning: be wary of those nearest to you. Sometimes greed makes them forget what family means. Don't let anyone, even blood, steal your self-respect. Thank you for hearing my story. If you've ever faced family drama like this, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button for more stories of truth and resilience. Your support keeps me going.